So yes, the organizer of this seminar series is Central European University's a small research center that still remained in Budapest, and that's the Democracy Institute. And within that, there is a devoted group of scholars who want to do global research, and that's the Global Forum for Democracy and Development. I hope I didn't forget anything, so I can introduce Eva Fodor, who has long been a professor and a member of the Central European University. She's also served for a long time as pro-rector, also in the most difficult times when CEU was expelled from Hungary and had to leave the country. And as you know now, this university is based in Vienna. Um, she's mainly her main research focus has been gender equality, gender differences, especially on the labor market, but also on welfare. And she has a really great book on the gender regime of anti-liberal Hungary that describes the introduction, what she calls, of a Carefare regime in Hungary that I believe I believe, a concept that can be expanded and used and utilized in other illiberal regimes as well. Her ongoing research projects address the impact of the COVID, but I guess this is the past. This is the past. So I think Eva will tell us more about her very recent research interest. So Eva, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be talking to you. And also thank you for the very kind introduction, and to MSF for organizing this panel and putting up with me not submitting things on time. Let me share my screen. And I hope that you can see it, right? You can see all my slides now, but you're not going to be able to see all my slides. Now you can see the cover slide, right? And everybody can hear me, all right. Yeah, Zorka, at least Zorka, I can see you, so you can see me. You can see the slide and everything is okay, right?
Yes, I can see you and I can see the slides. So one slide now, yes. So everything is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I am going to be talking about ethno-nationalist pronatalism. It's a bit of a longer term to pronounce, so maybe we can think of some better way of characterizing it. But it is a phenomenon that I think we all need to think about and explore in a bit more depth. So first, I'll talk about pronatalism and sort of ideas about populations, and also talk about how a specific anxieties about the population that's expressed in pronatalism changes the logic of social citizenship. And then, or sort of also somewhat as we go along, I will focus on a case study of this in Hungary. And I cannot believe, I cannot tell you how much pleasure it gave me to write 2010 to 2026. So the case study of Hungary in these 16 years, this end date, it was really total pleasure to put there. Okay, so you know that population size has historically been created anxieties in politicians and in the general population as well. You all probably can guess who this guy is. Anyone? You can write it in the chat, except I can't see the chat, so don't write it in the chat, but somebody speak up.
I checked the chat, and I think I know, but I wait for other answers.
Anyone? Let me help. Okay, so this is Malthus, the first person who expressed, maybe not the first person, one of the most famous person who expressed anxieties about the population. He was talking about the overpopulation in the 18th century and argued that the size of the population is growing exponentially, whereas the resources of the earth are growing arithmetically, and eventually the population will not have enough to eat and die out. So this created a buzz. The fact that we still know about it suggests the same. similar ideas came up. This is in the late 1960s. This extremely famous book was published by Paul Ehrlich in the United States, The Population Bomb, and he basically voiced the same issues. He was worried about how the planet is not going to be able to sustain the growing population. This sort of, in fact, prompted the start of the environmentalist movement, but also, generated even more anxieties about the size, the growing size of the population. And then finally, I mean, another example is the one-child policy in China, which was introduced in the 1979, which was a very strong statement about the importance of reducing the size of the population of the then largest country of the world. So most anxieties about population size have been about worries about us being there's too many of us, right? About an increase in an overpopulation issue. But recently, the opposite problem has popped up, and here you see a lot of countries, 12 countries, and sort of the fertility rate in 12 very different countries, and see how it's declining everywhere globally too. Not yet, but the fertility rate is expected to decline, and the size of the Earth's population is supposed to also decline. You see in Europe, the decline, of course, started in the 1940s, but accelerated in the 1980s, and then again is accelerating now, and in each individual country. And not just in developed countries, but you see the same trend in, of course, India and Kenya, and you know that South Korea is the classic case where the population, the fertility rate is the lowest in the whole world. So while overpopulation has dominated the population discourse for a very long time, now underpopulation and a decline in the size of the population is something that is worrying politicians. Particularly so because it seems that radical anti-natalist policies, so policies that try to stop population growth, have been actually quite effective. Here on the right-hand side, you see how the Chinese one-child policy decreased the fertility rate, even though it was introduced at the time when the fertility rate had already been falling. So you see that it was introduced in 1980. I'm pointing at the middle of this chart, and you see that by then fertility had been declining, but then this led to further decline in the population, so much so that of course it was reversed now. So anti-natalist policies have been quite successful, but pro-natalist ones less so. We know of at least one that's close to home, at least close to my home, Ceausescu's experiment in the 1960s to increase the size of the Romanian population, and the blue line is what represents this is fertility rate, fertility rates in Romania. And what you see is that as soon as these extremely restrictive, really punitive pro-natalist policies, which included the full restriction of abortion, absolutely no access to contraceptives, even the monitoring of women for pregnancy, all of this resulted in a huge increase in fertility. But then, of course, as people adjusted, the fertility rate went down to whatever trends all similar countries had been following. So pro-natalist policies have been less successful in achieving the result of an increase in the size of the population. Now, as I said before, pronatalism is having a revival in the 21st century. In the early 2000s, 2010s, the concept of the population crisis has gained strength in the European Union. It had been there before, but that's when more and more policy briefs started to be written about this issue, and people started to worry about the possible consequences of the population crisis. Now, in the middle of the 2010s, this migration wave that we experienced in Europe actually offered a possible solution to the population problem, and it was accepted by some countries as a possible solution, but in others, an alternative solution emerged, and this is what I will call ethno-nationalist pronatalism. In the 2010s, we are at a historical juncture. It's a historical juncture because at least three sort of historical processes are coming together, and I'll just mention them briefly, and I'll talk about them in a bit more detail, but you're familiar with them, at least to some extent. The three events, or the three sort of historical processes, include the third wave of authoritarianism and the emergence of European illiberal regimes in the early part of the 21st century, in the second decade of the 21st century. The second is the rise or the strengthening of the anti-gender movement and the attachment of this movement to many of these illiberal regimes. And finally, the idea of the migration, the process, the migration waves, as well as the rejection of these of migration as a solution to the problem of the population decline. So just to recap, what do I mean when I say the third wave of authoritarianism? Let me show you what this meant in a specific country, in Hungary. Again, many of these processes took place in other European countries. Many of these processes are taking place in other countries in general in the world, including the United States. And again, it gives me so much pleasure to say in Hungary between 2010 and 2026. Let me just quickly go through what this authoritarianism entailed. And the introduction of a new constitution, which changed the election rules, the elimination or abandoning the principles of the rule of law. The government started to exercise control over the judiciary and exercise political pressure over just about everybody and other sort of major state institutions, full control over the media and the dictating of coverage in the media, ongoing corruption and abuse of public funding, channeling public funding for political purposes or to build a political alliance. The appointment of loyalists, lacking often expertise to head state institutions and to head them for permanently or for very long periods of time. Significantly reduced labor rights to serve the economic needs of the regime, which were tied still to neoliberal globalization. And ongoing harassment of not just NGOs, but all civil organizations, the defunding of many civil organizations that were not appealing to the regime, and an ongoing harassment of others, as well as, of course, the creation of government-friendly, so to say, civil organizations to support the political purpose of the regime, the abandoning of academic freedom, state-supported xenophobia, and also introduction of state emergency related first to COVID and then to the war to Ukraine. So this concept of a state emergency. Oops, sorry. Now, all of this came to sort of an end a few weeks ago, but these represented some of the elements of authoritarianism, what we call the third wave of authoritarianism, or what some people call the illiberalism, that is the kind of regime where elections take place, as they did in Hungary 2 weeks ago, and yet other elements, institutions of democracy, are being abandoned. This is one factor that that helped revive ethnocentric pronatalism. The second is the anti-gender movement, which is a global movement, and I'm happy to answer your questions if you have any about them, but I'm not going to go into a lot of details. In general, this movement, which sort of really is a global movement, but in a lot of Europe, you saw this in a lot of European countries with protests and political action also that held the idea or that suggested that gender is binary. In fact, it does not exist according to the Hungarian government, the past Hungarian government. It's and argued also that there's only sex, gender, sex roles are biologically determined or God-given, denied the rights of sexual minorities, oppose sexual education, reproductive rights, trans rights, etc. So all of these traditional conservative ideas about gender got voiced in public, in the streets, but also in the political agenda of a number of countries. So out of these, a new solution to the demographic crisis came about, which is an ethno-national, which I call ethno-nationalist pronatalism. The goal is to increase in many instances selectively native birth in heterosexual, married, typically married, often middle class and ethnically pure families. Incentives are employed rather than punitive measures. And there's a great deal of variation in how ethno-nationalist pronatalism is employed. But these core ideas are shared in a number of countries where I've seen this taking shape. Now, let me stop here for a second and ask if you can think of examples of pronatalist policies from your country. You might have experienced pronatal. You might have, wherever you're from, you might have, your country might have introduced pronatalist policies of various types. There are many different kinds. So why don't you write them in the chat? I can't see the chat, but if you can think of one. Yeah, or just speak. Go ahead. Let me just, if I can move on. Yes. So let me talk a bit. Let me now turn to just a bit for a moment to Hungary as to describe what pronatalist, like what kind of pronatalist measures do we have in mind? And I grouped them into 4 different categories. So Hungary between 2011 and 2025 introduced cash transfers to parents with children, like maternity benefits. Somebody mentioned that. Funded maternity leaves, family allowances to all sorts of families. Then there are also tax-based, this is again something that somebody mentioned, of family tax benefits. But the most radical one, which I bet you have not seen, is the idea that women with a certain number of children, which now is 2, do not have to pay income tax, personal income tax. The elimination of income tax for mothers with children, not fathers, but mothers. That's again, the idea is that this is to support raising children. Loans, housing loans, somebody mentioned that, renovation, subsidies, etc. And then there are in-kind benefits. So the offering of in nursery places, free meals, free school books, etc. And there are so many others. So these types and like a whole complex of this was introduced in Hungary with sort of a move from cash benefits and in-kind benefits towards loans and tax-based benefits. Now, these policies, if in a country, all of these policies.
Sorry, Eva, there is a question in the chat related to what you just said. And that's how mothers that don't have to pay income tax, how their social security rights are affected, including pensions and so on.
That's a good question, but mothers who don't pay income tax don't have pension rights. On the other hand, the point you're making, which is that this makes a huge difference. I mean, this actually preferences children of mothers who are working is a very important point. Also, the fact that if women don't pay, a lot of women don't pay income tax, because it's not that, this is not limited to the 18th birthday of the child. You do not pay income tax ever. Then, this would clearly decrease the amount of money that the state receives in taxes, which would probably have implications to welfare payments and pension payments. But certainly it makes a huge difference. It creates differences amongst women and differences amongst families and differences amongst children. Children whose mothers work have access to an extra 15% of the mother's income if this regulation remains in place, about which I have.
If I may just come in with a small comment on this. So actually, it is now mothers with 4 or 3 or more children, and from next year it will be from 2027, and we don't know yet whether the new government will change that.
Right.
And also, this wouldn't impact in any ways their social security payments. So social security, social insurance contributions are still paid by these working mothers and their employers, so their social security rights are not impacted by this measure at all. Personal income tax goes into the general treasury, general budget, not into the social security. So their social rights are not negatively affected.
Yes, and the social rights of women who don't have children, they did not have pension rights to start with. That I think that's the question I was answering to. Yes, right. So, I mean, this is an interesting piece of legislation, but there are many others here which are actually quite innovative. In any case, the point is, you see that this package of pronatalist benefits is quite generous and quite excessive. I'll talk a bit more about its impact and who they benefit particularly. My argument is that when a state introduces a pronatalist package of this sort, or even just elements of this, that changes the logic of what's called social citizenship. Social citizenship, as you probably know, is the set of social rights that allow at least a minimum standard or guarantees a minimum standard of living to people. T.H. Marshall came up with the concept in a long time ago, and he argued that social citizenship, so the social aspect of citizenship has to complement other aspects of citizenship, like civil rights, in order to create full citizenship. Now, the institutional framework through which social citizenship is realized is obviously the welfare state. And welfare states come in different shapes and in different logics. And how the way the kind of social citizenship rights they mete out also varies, its character and its quality. Some welfare states, as you might be familiar with this, allow citizens to claim social rights on the basis on a variety of bases. Sometimes on the basis of just being a citizen of the country. Sometimes on the basis of social insurance, having worked or actually being in the labor market. Sometimes on the basis of need. Needy people, or if you're needy, then you're likely to get social benefits. Then you can social benefits. Depending on the balance of these, that changes the character of the welfare state. And also, of course, will have lead to different outcomes in terms of social inequalities. Now, when social citizenship rights, claiming social citizenship rights, is tied to social insurance, to work status, we typically call that a workfare state. Researchers also named a different type of welfare state, one that is punitive rather than supportive, one where citizenship rights, when needy citizens their needs are not met, but they're being punished for being needy and being incarcerated, and this is called prison fare, Loic Lacan's idea. My argument is that we see in illiberal Hungary or illiberal regimes in Europe and sort of in the broader neighborhood of Europe, a novel construction, what I call the Carefare state. And this is the kind of state where unpaid care work, not social insurance, not social citizenship, not citizenship rights, not need, unpaid care work and reproduction serve as the basis of making claims on the state. This is a new logic. It's also characterized. There are a few more characteristics of the Carefare state that I explored that I'd like to mention, and then I will discuss them in a bit more depth. Other than the fact that care work and reproductive work serves as the basis of claims making, these Carefare states are also characterized by targeting families rather than individuals. Welfare states typically, you make claims as an individual citizen, as an individual who's working. In a Carefare state, families make claims on the state, and together they receive benefits and social subsidies. Now, just like neoliberal, we live in a global neoliberal context, and just like in neoliberal countries, well, Carefare states also deregulate services, but instead of commodifying, instead of commodifying them, I shouldn't have said decommodification, instead of commodifying social services, so hiring market-based providers to provide healthcare, for example, or elder care, they pass these on to churches, to establish churches, and it is these churches that provide the social services instead of the state. I call this churchification, and this has significance. How social services and social benefits are provided has significance for its quality and the conditions under which this can be received, and all the other stuff that goes with it. The fourth characteristic of this novel construction is what I call native paternalism, the preference of birth to support population growth, and not just birth, but that birth has to happen to native women, and not just the birth, but the taking care of children also has to happen by children. That's why I call it maternalism. Rather than migrants or migrant workers or guest workers, maybe taking care of children, as in some farther away part of the world. And finally, the fifth characteristic that I want to talk about is the sentimentalization of women's paid work, as opposed to the realization of gender inequality in the labor market. So the argument is that these five things together, but primarily the first, sort of led by the first principle, creates a new form of logic, welfare state logic, a new logic of social citizenship. It is this ethno-nationalist pronatalism that's turned into a welfare state policy that creates Carefare. And Carefare is characteristic of illiberal Hungary. It's also characteristic in somewhat different shape and through somewhat different processes of other illiberal countries like Poland, like Turkey, like Serbia, like Italy, to perhaps a lesser but still important aspect. Now, I am now going to talk about these five in a bit more depth, but not a whole lot more depth, I promise. First, the first characteristic, that care work has become an important basis of claiming social citizenship rights. Not the only one, obviously, but a very important one. The most generous subsidies can be claimed on the basis of social citizen, on the basis of care, on the basis of having children. This is to illustrate about the president of the Hungarian parliament, who's going to be president for, I don't know, another 5 more days or so, said that who is a decent Hungarian citizen? Not someone who speaks Hungarian. It is someone, so not, citizenship is not on the basis of actually being a citizen, or social citizenship, right, is not on the basis of being actually born in Hungary or being in Hungary. It is someone who has 3 or 4 children, 9 to 12 grandchildren. I mean, they also have to speak Hungarian and have to be committed to the Hungarian nation. So here you see how, and he has many other pronouncements about how care work really is what makes a citizen. Reproducing the nation is what allows somebody to have citizenship rights. Indeed, Zorka has calculated this, but the amount of money that's being distributed, is being distributed on the basis of care work is huge, and people can receive hundreds and thousands of percentages of their of the average wages in loans or in tax benefits or in other types of subsidies if they promise to have the proper number of children. So care work and reproductive work has become an important basis of claiming social citizenship rights. And at the same time, the Hungarian government reduced or devalued or allowed other forms of subsidies to disappear or lose its value, like a lot of the unemployment payments, etc. So this is perhaps the most important.
Is the shift from individuals to families characteristic only of illiberal regimes? Do you notice something similar in regimes that position themselves as liberal? So individual versus family-based benefit claiming or social rights claiming.
I don't. I think this is characteristic of illiberal regimes, and particularly these types of illiberal regimes that we're surrounded with here in Europe, the ones that pursue this pronatalist, ethno-nationalist pronatalist agenda. So I don't think that this is something that liberal welfare states typically pursue. Benefits, and so they address individuals. There are strict regulations about who can have access to whose data and how So I think this is actually characteristic of illiberal regimes of this sort. These are just two illustrations of posters by Fidesz. I see that there's another question.
Yeah, it asked about the policies in France, and this was exactly what I was about to say, is that in France, and also to some extent in Germany, particularly in the tax system, there are many family-based or marriage-based features. So, and there have been for a long, long time, so not recently and not with neoliberalization.
Yes,
So
that's true. But
that's
of
also
course,
true. Mm-hmm.
that's true. But of course, the German and the French welfare state are not typically characterized as the most liberal welfare states. The UK and the US are typically but of course they're also not illiberal. Like if you think about, yeah, right. So I take your point. Still, I believe that taxation is one thing, but the fact that cash benefits go to families, almost all of these, the long list of subsidies that people can claim, they do not claim on the basis of, as their own right, but they claim it for their families. I think at least the balance of subsidies or benefits that can be claimed as an individual and as a family is significantly larger in these types of societies. But that's maybe this is an empirical question that that should be explored. There's also symbolic attention given to the families, and that's what you see here in these two advertisements, where which all offer various kinds of benefits and protection to families. You see that you're not, the state is not offering to protect people from poverty or destitution or illness, but offers to protect families. But again, we could discuss that further. Okay, the third characteristic is disinvestment. Like many neoliberal welfare states, the state is moving away from providing services and passing on the provision of services to a specific number of loyal churches. Here, this is again just to illustrate this process. You see the percent of children who are enrolled in church-run educational institutions in 2010 and in 2020. And you see that if you just look at the secondary school, this has more than doubled. It increased by 2.5. And if you looked in 2025, this number has gone up significantly. It's not just educational services, but also most social services that are offered by church-run institutions. So, for example, all foster parenting, all foster care is sort of farmed out to church-run organizations. There are no state-supported or state-run foster care agency in Hungary. All of them are church-based. This is important because churchification, as I call it, goes with specific ideological conditions that are set not by the state and that are not value neutral at all. And of course, they go with a degree of political influence that these allow for these churches as well as to the funders of the churches, which is the state. So, and of course, how services are being realized. So it's not just the claiming of the service. It's not just the value of money or the amount of money that you can get, but how you can get that benefit is also important in understanding how a welfare state works and how it supports people. Okay, the fourth point is native maternalism. So it is a two arguments. It's native women who are supposed to be giving birth, and it's maternalism, women who are supposed to, of course, not just to give birth, but to primarily be responsible for having children. This is a quote from Viktor Orban's third and final, no? Yeah. No, not final, almost final election victory in April 2018, when he said, I would like to make a deal with Hungarian women, Hungarian ladies, about the future and their role in it, as well as the new opportunities the government could offer. He was introducing family support or pronatalist policies, and interestingly, he did not address families. He addressed women, Hungarian women only, because women are held responsible for having children, for support, for maintaining the size of the nation and the health of the nation. In the poster, what you see is that we're pursuing family policies instead of migration policies. Again, emphasizing that it is native women who are giving birth, and it's native women who are looking after children, not outsiders, not migrants. And finally, and this is also, I believe, an important point, is that women are not only expected to be giving birth, but they're also expected to be working for wages. Many of the benefits that can be claimed are tied to salaries, just like, you saw the tax incentive or the tax elimination of the personal income tax. If you don't have an income, then you clearly don't pay income tax. So working for wages is important. But the overall, in this context, this wage work is not something that women are supposed to value or think of as a value. Women are supposed to be thinking of giving birth and caring as a value, and women are also not supposed to be competing with men in the paid labor market. So they should be participating, they should be contributing to the GDP, but they should also not really think of that as their life's work. As not then present, but sorry about the now, the past president of Hungary, Katalin Novák, said, "Do not believe that we women must always compete with men," says she in the highest position in all of Hungary. "Do not believe that we must have the same position, the same salary as them. Let's be happy that we were born women. Let's be happy that we were given the gift of being able to love and take care of others." So we acknowledge the fact that this is a lot of work, that women do a lot of work. We acknowledge the fact that paid work and care work is a lot of work together. But instead of valuing this, or instead of really valuing paying women wages, allowing them a career promotion, we sentimentalize this, and the state sentimentalizes this, and turns it into something that's secondary to women's true role as mothers. So, in sum, Carefare is a form of welfare regime which is characterized by claims on the state on the basis of reproduction care, which promotes pronatalism through incentives, not punitive measures, which is selective in terms of ethnicity, family formation, class, work and health status, age, and I could go on. I didn't discuss this explicitly, but you could see from what I described is that these policies can be claimed by families, so people who live in a particular type of family formation, people who work for wages, so are of a particular class status and work status, so they are in the formal labor market where they actually pay taxes, or when they can claim taxes back, and people who are of reproductive age. And finally, many of these policies leave out the most impoverished segment of the population, which is typically the Roma minority in Hungary. So this is a very selective form of welfare provision. The Carefare directly aims for ethnic purity explicitly and pronounced. There's no denying it, or it's not made a secret. And it builds on the notion of women as responsible for the reproduction of the nation as their main social role. So Carefare has a lot of uses for illiberal rule in Hungary. What you see in this picture is our ex-prime minister, and the claim that he makes on a regular basis that the father is a man and the mother is a woman. And then underneath it says, and the price of gas is 480 remains 480 forints. So he is campaigning. He's connecting his position on what gender is to a political statement that's completely separate from gender. And we see how gender is being used to justify or to support a political position. Carefare is useful to discipline women into being productive and reproductive subjects at the same time. It also differentiated and distinguished this illiberal rule from other types of political structures. And Orban made a lot of use of that in order to claim political legitimacy, to garner loyalty and votes. And also it has been used to quell discontent because it redistributed resources to certain segments of the population who then became less discontent and loyal followers. Now, demographers typically talk about the consequences of pronatalism in terms of fertility rates. But pronatalism has a lot of other consequences that we typically don't mention, and I think it would be very important to review these. At this point, we have very little information about what those consequences are, but I'll give you hypotheses. One thing we do know that in terms of fertility, the impact of illiberal pronatalism is minuscule and vanishing. I can show you later the fertility rate trends in Hungary, and they're going down. But in addition to that, at least the expectation is that pronatalism has increased women's work burden and increased women's exploitation. Not men's, but women's. It has reshaped gender inequalities in paid and also in unpaid work. Recently, with the introduction of these tax benefits to women and the personal income tax, that will also it might have the opposite effect. It could have, it could reduce the gender gap in wages. It should reduce the gender gap in wages. It hasn't quite yet. This type of ethno-nationalist pronatalism also leads to class and ethnic inequalities, and as I mentioned, Carefare advantages those who are already on the top. And classic inequalities are reshaped at the bottom of the social hierarchy as well, because certain groups benefit, at least temporary benefit, from this windfall of benefits or that can be claimed on the basis of having children. Yet other groups at the bottom of the social hierarchy don't. So there's a reconstellation there as well. It also cements heterosexual monogamous couplings as the only form of acceptable partnership in society, and therefore has consequences for our people's understanding of gender and sexuality. So this is my last question. Is it over? And I decided not to answer this question, but finish by actually asking you what you think. Is it over now that that Orban has lost power and Hungary is going to have a new government? Illiberalism, do we expect illiberalism to go? Do we expect, with perhaps the disappearance of the illiberal regime, do we expect the disappearance of ethno-national pronatalism or Carefare? And I'll stop here and I'll stop sharing.